It is a privilege to be joined with Dr. Tracey Tokuhama-Espinosa, who is no stranger to the Global Science of Learning Education Network, has conducted a number of webinars and presentations in behalf of the network. And today the subject is knowledge brokering. And Tracey, so thank you very, very much. You bring a lot of experience. Your most recent book, the Bringing the Neuroscience of Learning to Online Teaching in Educators Guide, which to me is what knowledge brokering is moving from the research and science to the actual classroom. And so as we explore this topic, first question is, what is your definition of knowledge brokering?
That is so provocative because, the first stage of the game, what you do is you'd probably have to define, what is knowledge and what is brokering. And I would say that what, at least I hope, what Giselin is looking at is even beyond just knowledge, because if we think of everything that people learn, it's knowledge, skills, attitudes. I think there's a lot of attitudinal shifts, but of course it lays on this foundation of just core knowledge. What is the shared knowledge we have in the learning sciences field, which is, I think, a huge question. And I wonder a little bit about the brokering, because I like it a lot, but I also, the first time I heard of it, since I'm sitting here in New York, I thought, you think of stockbrokers and you think of people who make their living off of other people's things, which I know that's not the real point of this. So what I would suggest is that maybe knowledge brokering is the ability to sort of leverage information, walk the talk of multiple transdisciplinary fields in order to have these conversations around the learning sciences, and done freely, in a sense that there's a mutual exchange and mutually beneficial gain for all. So not necessarily that brokering in the sense of where somebody gains from somebody else's information, but that there's an exchange. And I know that there was a toying around of the words, should this be knowledge exchanges or brokering? And I really like the transactional element of brokering, because it brings it to this idea that it has to become more than just out there. It has to be somehow actionable. So what can you do with that information once it's out there? And so I guess I'm not defining the word very, very, or this concept as clearly as I am chipping away at what I don't want it to be. So hopefully that helps us narrow in more tightly on what we're focusing on. But I do think that it's all of these basic conceptual bases that exist within all of the learning sciences in a transdisciplinary way that is mutually intelligible to all, and that is valued and multi-directional. So that's not just somebody translating for somebody else, but that there's that exchange. So that's what I would see in the word brokering more than just the exchange.
And where does the exchange take place in your mind? Is it between the educator and the researcher and scientist? Where is it?
I think that there's at least three different dynamics there, right? One is the researcher practitioner model of this idea of, does the teacher have these skill sets where they're actually looking into the research themselves? And if not, are researchers actually feeling open to working with teachers? So that is one exchange. The other exchange, I've always thought that looking at things from a mind, brain, health, and education perspective, not just educational neuroscience per se, but even broader, in the sense of learning sciences, including all these things such as even cultural studies, anthropological studies, linguistics, going much broader and having those kinds of exchanges. And so I think that's what was called for back in the early 2000s when mind-brain education was taking off, and people kept calling for this translational exchange. And I think that we have begun to bring researchers and practitioners together. I think that has worked out really well, and I think people are talking to each other. What's happening is, though, it still doesn't then move to this other level where you have expert knowledge gets translated into what's usable. So I think we've got there and we've translated it, but we have not disseminated it. So it's not actually common knowledge for teachers or educators. So I think we're heading in the right direction with that, but I think that the exchanges have begun to occur. What's not happening is it's not yet commonplace. So like you have the Deans for Impact. So you have whatever, 8, 9. You have a couple of universities that focus on teacher training that would really bring that in. And you have several other universities like Johns Hopkins working on mind, brain, and teaching. And you have, several isolated groups, but it's not that it's the norm for all teachers to know more about neuroscience, about psychology. I think that COVID kicked us, in the right direction to make people value the importance of, mind, brain health and education as as they impact educational decisions. But we're not quite there yet. But I do think that we're moving in the right direction there. So the exchanges, at least at the first level, researcher practitioner, at a second level where you're getting mind, brain health and educational experts in their own field to talk. But I think the third and ultimate step where we're not at yet is where you actually have a new kind of professional that is a learning scientist. That is, that is what we do. That is, a new type of formation. And I think we're moving in the right direction, but we're not quite there yet.
So in following up on that, who then, in your opinion, is doing this well? What are examples worth studying?
Oh, there's some really great people right now. I think, for example, Mary Helen Immordino-Yang has always been somebody I've just loved and admired, because she always approached this from a teacher perspective, and then very much from the humanness of being a parent, and then looking at all the neuroscience implications and the things that we can learn from the learning sciences, from science itself, that would actually inform, the human exchanges. So I'd say Mary Helen Immordino-Yang is great. Stanislas Dehaene in France has just been exemplar in terms of taking complex ideas on consciousness or on math or on language, and actually bringing them to the general public in a good way, even so much so that teachers embrace what he's talking about. So I think that he's another good one. I think Daniel Ansary with doing things in math, David Daniel doing just general translational work from cognitive side of things, cognitive psychology into teaching. There's a lot of people who are doing great work. Those are mainly people in the States. Others in Europe have been doing amazing things. Roberto Lent has been doing a fantastic job of doing more of the community outreach towards trying to move everybody forward with their understanding of the learning sciences, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I'd say Sarah-Jayne Blakemore and Uta Frith have been really fantastic in the UK. I think Paul Howard Jones has been doing a lot of wonderful things. I think in his quiet, retired way, Howard Gardner continues to do, inch the field forward. So I think there are a lot of good people out there, but and they're doing really good work. I think the bigger goal now is what I think Gisolin is out to do, is to really establish the community and sort of let's advance all of us, sort of making this leapfrogging forward in our understanding all together. I think that we have pockets of understanding, but I think once everybody shares this common base, I think people will move forward all together.
So how can the Global Science of Learning Education Network, or Gisolin, play a useful role?
I'd say that probably it's already done some wonderful things by tapping into, I can't remember, it was Sebastián Lespina, I can't remember who your first speakers were, but basically doing what other groups have not yet done, because they've been trying to be rather, they're very, very cautious and fair and more neutral, so they're not saying or sharing information about, the global impact of poverty on growing brains or things like that. That Gisolin is venturing into talking about bigger concepts, or the impact of technology on what's going on in learning, or bigger ideas. Those macro ideas have become a space of Gisolin sort of by default, by the first choices that you guys made, which I think is fantastic. But I think at a second level, the main thing is to go back to that word we were talking about before about brokering. If there could be a more unified type of a platform in which teachers and researchers, or the researcher practitioner, in which mind, brain health, and education specialists, or everybody from the learning sciences, where people could consider, well, this is a great first stop, let me check on the website what's going on with Jisola now, so that you can sort of acknowledge and see, what are these hot button topics, where is the research going, what are the limitations of what we are working with, who are key people out there. I'll give you a concrete example. Every week I have a dozen people write me emails asking, well, who can I talk to in the field? Hi, I'm studying in the middle of Iowa. I don't have anybody who's doing this, but this is where I want to go. I've had a taste of this. I've seen some of the videos that Jisola has, or I've heard about the IMBIS conference, and they get a taste of it and they want more, and they want to belong to a community, to a professional society of people who are moving in the same direction and advancing our understanding about the teaching learning dynamic. And I think that Jisola could play a really wonderful role in brokering the space, the physical, virtual, whatever space that is for encounter. Because there's a lot of great people out there doing great things, they just don't know where to meet. And I think that some people feel rather limited. If you go to the ARA, SIG, we oftentimes get people very, very in the throes of educational research. And if you go to the Society for Neuroscience, all they're doing is neuroscience research, and they're not really talking to each other, though they're almost studying very similar questions, right? Or you go to the early conferences or IMBIS, and you see very similar things going on, but people almost don't even know that this is happening. And so I think creating that unified space where people could actually get that macro overview of, well, what is going on within this community? Who is actually out there doing things? I think would really be very beneficial to a lot of, especially younger scholars who, they say, oh, I came across your name and I've written to a lot of people. I hope you'll write back. And when I write back, they're thrilled, but they're asking me to fill up their faculty with people that don't exist yet. And so what they're looking for now is well, what is the infrastructure then? Who can I hang on to? Who is a good point of reference? Who can I use as one of these leaders in the writing brain, or people learning early math skills, or what we're looking at, social emotional? Like, who are these thought leaders within the global science of learning? And I think that showing off the membership of Jisola would be very helpful to helping these younger scholars actually move. They themselves will become the force of the field, right?
Exactly. So you've spoken about this some. What are some of the barriers that need to be knocked down or confronted?
I think most of the barriers are more mental than physical. I think that the number one barrier, I think, and it has to do with this wonderful intellectual humility that you have, that everybody else has in the field, that everybody who leads, nobody wants to step on anybody else's toes. nobody wants to launch out and be the leader, or to say, well, yes, we will take the first steps, because everybody feels very humbly, and it's wonderful. It's a very generous field. People really say, wow, I know about this niche space, but I don't know about this other niche space. And everybody's so humble that nobody wants to launch into the bigger, broader definition of things, because it's not saying that we know everything, but it is saying we're offering parameters to think about this. And that's kind of scary, because we don't want to offend anybody who might fall out of those parameters. So I think probably the biggest barrier is in leadership. That has been true for all international organizations that are moving towards improving teaching and learning. Everybody is really comfortable in their own little slice, but it's really hard for people to take that leap into that bigger space. And I think that we could use a little bit of that bravery, even though it is. People are worried about it being misinterpreted as being arrogance, and I think that that's something we definitely, nobody wants to be accused of that, and everybody is really trying to, have their humble space. But I think we could use the leadership.
So, yeah, it's often a thin line, isn't it, between arrogance and effective advocacy and achievement. This has been very, very helpful. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just love the fact that you're asking, and this whole pedagogy of listening, you know. Let's hear what people are thinking about and what they'd like and what would help move this all forward. If we just have this ultimate goal of sort of having this broader, wider, international, transdisciplinary, you know, translational kind of a community, how does that all move forward? And so I appreciate all the things that you're doing here. And just, I would just add that if communication has always been, when I did my doctoral dissertation trying to figure out mind brain education, did it have standards, did it have parameters, did it have it? Number one thing that came up with everybody on the Delphi panel was, you know, we have to learn to communicate. And I think that just chapeau to you, you guys have done a great job of really doing a good, you know, keeping communication channels open and trying to listen.
I think it, and you reference this, it becomes even more important, it doesn't it, in this era of COVID, or hopefully emerging from COVID, but still feeling very much the impact and people looking for ways to address what we've all been through.
Yes, I think I definitely agree with that. And I think you shared, I think that's another thing that other groups have been a little bit more cautious in actually endorsing or sharing key publications. But Giselin has been sharing really strong resources that I think are very beneficial. There was a recent one, I think it was Sebastian's group that came out with that. It was a multi-authored very translational view, very easy to understand view of very difficult concepts. Fantastic. And those are the kinds of things, it'd be great if, you know, all the groups would feel comfortable saying this is really worth a read. But I think, again, people are so afraid of endorsing one thing because they might be forgetting something else, and then it's very hard. But I think it's wonderful that that we're taking those brave steps.
Well, we may have to change knowledge brokers or add knowledge bravery brokers.
Brave knowledge brokers.
Dare to be brave. Let me thank you very, very much for taking part in this and adding to it, and looking forward to talking much more about it.
Thank you. I appreciate the time, Bob.
So